Let's see. And live. And hello, and welcome to the Delicious Recipe here on UPRN. And if you're watching live, you could be checking us out on UFO Paranormal Radio, UFO Paranormal Radio. That's on YouTube. Also, they have their older one is UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials, and we're also live video on the Facebook UPRN site and on the Twitch UPRN site, and then audio on almost everywhere else that you can find podcasts being played. So tonight we have an author from the UK, William Wildblood, and he's read a recent book there, Earth is a School. And so, you know what, it's not even worth my part here to keep on yammering about stuff and explaining someone. It's best to have the author themselves and the person that is here with us. And I welcome you, William.
Thank you very much, Dale. It's good to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. Do you want to just, I guess for the listeners out there, just tell them, I guess, how you got started in this, because you've written other books before this one too as well, and just how your journey got to this part here, and give us sort of a view of that.
Yeah, well, this is my, it's either my third book or my fifth, depending on how you count, because a couple of them are just compilations of blogs, but I would call it my third proper book. And the first one was called Meeting the Masters, which was really kind of like an autobiography, a story of my spiritual apprenticeship. That's what I call it, Meeting the Masters, a spiritual apprenticeship. And that described the earlier part of my life and certain experiences I had, which were the basis of all my other writings and my whole spiritual journey. So that was that book. And then I wrote one called Remember the Creator, which I think is an important, very simple but important thing that we should all be doing while we're in this world. And then this latest one is Earth is a School, because that's what I think the Earth is. I think that's why we come here, to learn all sorts of things, but primarily to learn to deepen our awareness of ourselves as spiritual beings. And this is my most recent book.
Okay, and so with this one here, the little synopsis that I had about this one, and this is what I sort of had written down there. You'd be able to explain this better. So, Earth is a School is an examination of the material world. Or the material world is a spiritual school to develop consciousness, I guess, if that would you sort of say, or whatever?
Yes, well, I suppose if you boil us down to what we fundamentally are, it is consciousness. And that's the thing we always take with us wherever we go. And whatever sphere of being we're in, whether it's this physical world or the spiritual world, consciousness is what remains. So it's that is in the process of being developed. And I think, you see, my idea, it's not my idea, I think it's what most spiritual traditions would say, is that we are spiritual beings first and foremost, and that we are in a human body for a particular purpose. So I don't think of us as human beings so much as spiritual beings in human bodies. And my idea is that we come to this world from a spiritual domain, which is our true source. And while we're here, it's a unfolding process where we develop potentials and spiritual qualities that we have in potential, but they're not developed in the spiritual world. So we come here because this is a world of challenge and difficulty where things can be brought out which are latent. And so that's why we live in a world which has difficulty and pain and suffering, which we might think, this is terrible. Why would God put us in a world where there's pain and suffering and difficulty? But I think that happens precisely to make us evolve. It gives us the challenges that requires us to confront them, and in that way we learn.
Right.
That's the idea.
Right, and you see this through a lot of different, I guess you would say, religions or spiritual teachings and stuff like that, about this whole part about coming to, I guess, being born and learning a life lesson or learning some sort of something that you didn't have before. And I sort of see how there's some little bit of similarities in that in other I guess, would you call them spiritual awakenings or spiritual paths or whatever? That like there's some parts like you have in I guess in Asia where there's this reincarnation where you keep on coming back and relearning if you haven't learned enough. Do you sort of follow that part, or is it just this is a one-shot deal of learning?
Well, I do believe in reincarnation, yeah, but not. And in fact, in the book, there is 2 or 3 chapters about reincarnation. I don't really see it in the Eastern way, because in the Eastern way, you're on the wheel and the wheel just goes round and round, and it doesn't really have much purpose except to get off the wheel. But I think from a Western perspective, reincarnation is to do with each life you're building up a greater spiritual presence within yourself. So it's not really a question of just getting off the wheel. It's a question of learning through each life and becoming more evolved through each life. So there is a purpose to it. It's not just in Buddhism, really. It's a kind of futile thing, the incarnation. You can make yourself good karma and come back in a better state, but the idea is always to get off the wheel. The wheel itself has no purpose. It's not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. But I think the wheel is going somewhere, and that it takes us with it. So there's this idea that there's a linear progression as well, which you don't get so much in Eastern religions. I think there everything is cyclical, but in the Western conception of these things, there is a journey and there's a destination, and I think that's what reincarnation is really all about.
Okay, so like in a part of that, there's the journey going to somewhere. What is the destination place then?
Well, good question. In one sense, you could say it's heaven. In another sense, you could say it's not a place. It's to make us what we are in potential, which is gods. I think the world is a training ground for making gods out of spiritual babies, and so we can then become creative beings ourselves in the highest spiritual sense. And so it's not just about going to heaven and being happy. It's also about learning to use all the spiritual energies that exist on all levels of the universe. So, for instance, I don't think that when the spiritual babies, as we might call them, that we are to begin with, they don't really have intelligence, and we develop intelligence in this world through the difficulties that we face. And there are other powers too. Love, of course, if you think of love as a power or a quality, but that's something that we also have to develop. It's not a God-given thing. It's within us as almost a fundamental tone of our being, but we still have to get it ourselves. We have to acquire it and the capacity for it. And so all these things is what the journey is all about. Because the school, and call it a school, call it a journey, very, very similar ideas, really. It's all to do with developing and progressing onwards. And in a way, the journey doesn't really have any end. That's the good thing. There's no ceiling in heaven. It's limitless. And so you reach a point where you've learnt your lessons, but then it opens up into a new future. There's always different dimensions of being.
Right. Okay. That sort of seems interesting. There, like you finish this sort of like a level here, and then you go into another level of new learning. I guess you would say. I guess if something that we don't understand as of yet.
No, we don't. I mean, it's sort of way beyond our conception. These things we can understand that this is a pattern, but we can't yet understand how the pattern unfolds. Especially in the more advanced stages. We're just like little school children. We can't understand how the university professors do their stuff. Yeah.
Right. So how would like say the negative, say hell, where someone's gone down? I guess goes into the sort of how does the Christianity concept of this timeline or this Earth time that we're here fit into any of this, or does it?
It does. I mean, I do regard myself as a Christian, albeit a kind of slightly strange one, I suppose. but I believe in the basic Christian principles. But hell, I think, well, the idea is that when you die, your external situation is a reflection of your internal consciousness. So if your consciousness is dark and enclosed and selfish and cruel and all the rest of these bad things, then you will find yourself in something which is an externalization of that. So it's a reflection of what you are. But I think that every hell is like a prison, and
Right.
there's a door in that prison, and you hold the key to that door if you know it. But the key is you changing yourself. Once you start to change yourself, then you can get out of that prison. I think I don't regard hell as a permanent state that you're there for eternity, because I mean, what parent would put their child in that kind of state forever? And presumably God is far better than we are, so he would always want us to escape from that. But if we've put ourselves in there, nobody sends us to hell but ourselves.
Right.
And if we put ourselves in there, I'm sure we can get ourselves out. It may take a while, and I'm sure there are beings, maybe angelic beings, or maybe your mother from the earth world, who would come and try and help you get out. But ultimately, it's the old, take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, and that's what hell would be. It's your own mind that puts you there, and your own mind can get you out too.
Right. You almost see sort of stories like that in was it ancient Greek stories, and even Gilgamesh going down to the underworld and trying to bring somebody back, or what was it, Persephone trying to bring out of hell and to bring forward to save, to move on to their journey. And there's a lot of I guess I'm sort of jumping all over the place here, but there is sort of ancient stories that sort of go back of this traveling path of there is no finality in anything, right? You're not locked away anywhere, and then your journey sort of still goes forward in some way, I guess. And then I guess everybody learns a lesson. I think every story has a beginning, a travel through to get to some finality of something, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think that these stories from ancient history, they have relevance for us even now. And I think that the idea that there is a way out is a very important thing that we should hold on to, because the basic idea of the universe is love and light and goodness. And everything is trying to bring us into that. Nothing is trying to make darkness. Well, I think there probably are some things that try and make darkness, but those are things that have gone wrong. But the real basic truth of the universe is to bring every element of it, every piece of it, that's every individual piece, up higher, more into the light. So if some of those pieces surround themselves with darkness, there will be the universe as a whole trying to get them out of that darkness, because it's always trying to bring things up. It's always trying to move forwards, move higher, develop all parts of it. Because I suppose if you're God, every bit of the universe is part of you, and so you don't want to leave anything behind. So it's rather like in the Bible, the story where Jesus says, a shepherd, he's got a flock of 100 sheep or something, and he loses one. So he leaves the 99 who are okay, and he goes off in search of the ones that's lost. And I think that's probably true. I think there is an element where God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, does go after the lost sheep and to try and bring them back into the flock.
Okay, yeah, that sort of makes sense. Where do you think that? There's a whole bunch of parts that you had. Like I went through your book, and I went through and I sort of jotted down different little things in here. And you had a part about high and low energies, negative energies, and positive, the darkness and the lightness, and that. So we have this in here in North America. Well, not in North America. They have this all around the world about negative entities that try to drain, I guess, because we are sort of almost like a battery ourselves, right? We are an electrical system, right? Our brain, everything is electrical. But where would you figure that something that isn't like us, but a negative entity that is trying to drain away from you? Because I think that you had a part in there about about demons or sort of negative stuff. I think it was around page 165 or something like that.
I think there are such things as demons. I think this is a result of God giving us free will, and free will is very important because free will is essential if you are to know love. Robots are not going to love. Whatever artificial intelligence enthusiasts might think, robots are never going to love. You need free will to love, and for that you need to be a spiritual being. But the downside to that is that free will can go wrong, and you can have beings that reject goodness and truth and love because what they want is to increase themselves, but increase themselves in the wrong way, because we do increase ourselves, but we have to increase ourselves within the context of God. But if we try and increase ourselves independently of God, that's when things go wrong. And so these demons eventually get to the point, I believe, where they cut themselves off from divine life, and they can't receive the energy to exist directly from God, as we all do. In this world, our energy our life energy comes from God. But I think there comes a point with some of these beings, these demonic beings, where they have to steal energy to carry on, to survive. And that they try and do by influencing us. But the good news is that no demon can influence you against your will. It's always trying to encourage faults you may have so that you give way to. If you give way to anger, it can steal a bit of energy like that, because you're bringing your life energy down. You're lowering the vibration of your life energy to a form that it can take. But if you don't give way to bad feelings, bad emotions, and so on, then they can't do anything with you. You're free of them. Now, of course, we all do give way to small things, but this is one of the important things on the spiritual path: is to learn to control your reactions. Something at which I'm not very good, I've got to say. But
well, that's the whole thing about learning Earth is a school, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Everybody's here to learn something. So I'd seen some parts in there about meditation, and is that's something that it was sort of taken from or being used, or that you've gotten from say would it be Indian culture or Hindu, like where they meditation, they believe in like the seven orbs throughout the body, where you have to align everything to get into this consciousness. Is it that where you're sort of going with this, or?
Well, I did live in India for several years, but my meditation was always very, very simple. It's really just a question of sitting quietly, emptying the mind, breathing deeply, and just trying to be aware of God within you, in the heart. Because I think that's where the spiritual center is. So meditation to me is not some kind of esoteric practice particularly. It's just a question of centering yourself in the heart and just being aware of God.
Right.
That's why I think the second book that I wrote was called Remember the Creator. Okay. I think that's a very important spiritual practice, really, just to try to be aware of God, practice the presence of God.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and another part that you had there that I seen there, that you had the three parts. I guess it was the spirit, the soul, I guess, which is the mind, and then the body. Right? Is that how that's how we function here on our material Earth, that we're here while we're sort of learning?
Well, I think that's the traditional designation of our being. Yeah, there's the spirit, which is your divine self. There's a spark of God within each one of us, and that's spirit. It's like the light within us that lights everything else up. The soul, I would put as our individual consciousness, the basic self that we are, and then the body, of course, is just our physical form. But I think there are spiritual bodies too. I think that when we die, we're not just a kind of wisp of gas that floats around. I think there is a a spiritual body as well. Because if you think about the three fundamental qualities of God, you can think of them as truth, goodness, and beauty. And truth would be the spirit, goodness would be the soul when it's working as it should, and beauty is the body. And all these three things go together: spirit, soul, body, truth, goodness, and beauty. And I think that there will always be these three, whatever form we're in, whether it's a physical or spiritual. There's always going to be this triple aspect to our nature.
Right, that's even they talk about, even in a lot of religions, there's always like a three-part positive and a three-part negative. I guess in like in Christianity, you have that God, Father, and the Holy Spirit, and then the negative there too. And a lot of different parts that always comes into threes and stuff like that. And now we have here our spiritual self, our body, and that. So what do you think? Well, besides the part about learning the consciousness of, I guess, focusing ourselves into understanding, I guess, God and the universe, is that basically what our main purpose is here on Earth? Is
I think that's our main purpose, yeah. And I think that problem with the world today is that we've lost sight of that main purpose. We've gone in all sorts of different directions. But there are other purposes too. We have to develop all aspects of our being. I think we can't just we can't all be monks, for instance.
Right.
But so we have to develop intelligence. You know, like an ordinary school, you have different classes. You can have your maths and your I don't know what else you do. Such a long time since I went to school. What else do you do?
Right.
English, French, science. So, but all different aspects. But the main thing to me is the spiritual, is the becoming, knowing yourself as a spiritual being first and foremost. And then things come from that. Once you've got that basic thing down, other things develop out of that, but they develop in the right way. For instance, science. I think science can be a wonderful tool of understanding, but it can also be slightly diabolical if you cut God out of science and then think of it solely in terms of controlling the world for your own materialistic ends, then it can become quite a bad thing. But when it's practiced with an awareness of God, then it can be a beautiful thing and a creative thing.
Yeah, well, you have right now here in North America, you have even in the US, you have the doctor that's Dr. F. Won't use his full name, but he's been saying he is science, trust the science, right? Which is sort of, and that you have now you have these AI, which is science, trying to put the soul into technology. And a lot of this, I think this is a part of the way that a lot of people are sort of thinking that technology is a great thing for humanity to possess, or to go to reach God faster, right? And that's this thinking that some people have, that we can't exist without technology, that it's, and you're seeing a lot of people today that are linked to technology so badly that they go into fits when they're disconnected. And I think a lot of people need to get back to the part of using technology as a tool and not as a crutch, not as a purpose to mainstay of life.
Well, in the Bible, there's a story of the Tower of Babel. Do you know that story?
Yeah.
So I mean, this is what technology is. I was going to say in danger of becoming, but I won't. I'll say it has become. I think that's what it's become. And who knows, it may suffer the same fate as that Tower of Babel if it carries on much longer like that. Because we think we can use technology to replace God, and we really can't. We'll find we get more and more alienated from our true selves, and we'll be lost. And I think I feel very sorry for young people now who are just totally caught up in their phones and everything to do with constant stimulation and no chance for quietness where they can go within and just naturally attune themselves to the world as it really is, not as it's presented to them through technology and this constant bombardment of images and sounds and so on. So people will end up being lost. And I think people are realizing this, and perhaps some are turning away. And I hope in time more people become understanding of the very real problems associated with this addiction, because that's what it is. It's an addiction to technology.
Yeah, oh, I totally agree, and I think I've talked about this on my show many times, where I've seen that there's been a push, and it's been even in the school system, that about moving people into these large mass metropolis cities and stuff like that, where everything is concrete. You've gotten away from nature, you've gotten away from everything. You're basically become dependent on the system that's there. Whereas like before, where like, well, I'm pretty rural up here, where people had farms, they had their animals, they sort of lived off the land, hunted. They weren't sort of dependent on a massive part where you're living on top of people and mass transit and stuff like that and nature. So I can see this totally going that way, where we're pushing people into these, I guess you would call it, their own concrete jail cells, I guess, and that wired in, plugged in. How do you find over there in the UK how people are reacting to the technology, and just even during this? Well, won't go too much into this pandemic, because it gets everything sort of shut down off of all the stations and stuff like that. But how are you finding people around you, how they're viewing today past how you saw them back about 20, 30 years ago?
I think we're much worse off. I think we're losing freedom, I think, and we don't seem to realize it. That's the terrible thing. We just seem to accept it all. I think it could possibly be the old thing of, bread and circuses. As long as we have enough to eat and we're sort of physically comfortable and we have the entertainment on the TV, on the internet or whatever, that keeps us quiet. But I can't believe that human nature won't eventually reassert itself, and people will think this is not the way to be. We're being drugged, and we need to wake up. I think we do need to wake up. I think that's really important at the moment. And of course, it's getting a lot worse with the thing we're not going to talk about. But
right, yeah.
But that's making it worse, and it's making people hide away much more, and it's also making them much more easily controllable too. They will do all sorts of things because of fear, and they probably need to wake up to this thing as well. But we won't talk about that.
Yeah.
Unless you want to.
No. Well, I've done that before, and I've seen what's happened with shows being popped off of certain.
We'll stick to the spiritual stuff.
Right, but you mentioned the word fear, and that's got to be one of the biggest things that I guess would be to stop progression and learning. Would you not say?
I think, yeah, absolutely. I think it is, because when you're frightened, you retreat to the security of what you already know. So that means you're not going to grow anymore. You're not going to learn anymore, because learning, as we all know, means taking risks. It means being a little adventurous, doesn't it? And if you're then just seeking to protect yourself, which is what fear makes you do, then you just become much more sort of inward, like a crab scurrying into its shell or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't go out and look, and you don't expose yourself to the chance of getting hurt, because it's only by doing that, by exposing yourself, that you can grow, that you can learn new stuff. So yeah, fear is a very paralyzing thing.
Yeah.
That's why it does say, in a very important saying in the Bible, that love casts out fear, and love in this sense means trust in God. I think if you have belief in God and then you can have trust in God too, and think that, okay, things may go wrong, but there's always God there. He's always going to catch me if I fall. I might fall a long way, but eventually he will catch me, and eventually things will be all right. And I think that's what you have to believe. And then you can take chances in life. You can then seize opportunities much more. So yes, fear is a very crippling thing.
Right. Yeah. And we see a lot of that today on our news channels up here in North America.
Yeah, we do. We do.
That's a big a part of that's the part that controls most of the narrative, right? And I've said here many times, and even with Laura there too as well on her show, is that it's so important to learn and get as much information that you can out there. And that's why I like having people on here to get their sort of views and perspectives and their thoughts on stuff. And one part that I saw this word, I hadn't really even heard this word, I guess in a long time or recently, but you talked about the discarnate spiritual teachers. Do you want to explain what those are?
Yes, well, they're very important to my story, actually, because I had certain experiences when I was younger, and they involved being spoken to by spiritual teachers who were not in the body. I had a friend who I lived with, who's a much older man than me. He's about 35 years old. And when I was about in my early 20s, we met and we got talking, and we decided to pursue a spiritual life together. And we used to meditate each evening. And one time during these meditations, he went into a very deep trance, and he was gone. But a voice spoke through him, and it spoke to me, and it introduced this being who was not Michael. That was the name of my friend. He said that he was a master. That's what they called themselves. I say they because there were several of them who spoke over the years, and they were coming to teach me certain lessons. He said, didn't imply that I was known to them from before my birth. So this is, again, goes back to my idea of us having a previous existence than to our life in this world. And they spoke to me over 20 odd years, quite a lot to begin with, and much less as time went on, because they didn't want to spoon feed me, as they said. And they're really the basis of my spiritual understanding. They told me to think of them when I asked them who and what they were. They just said, think of us as messengers from God, which is what I do think of them as. I think they were. My belief is that they were human beings, or had been human beings, but they'd moved to a spiritual state beyond the human level. They, as it were, they'd learnt all their lessons. They graduated, I think, going back to the earth as a school idea. And they also said to me that they would continue to speak to me, but through what they called impression, which is a kind of spiritual communication, whereby you receive ideas, usually in a non-verbal form, and then you have to translate that with your own mind into words and communicable ideas. So you can never really tell if ideas you get come from them or from yourself or who knows where. But I think that I still receive teachings from them, but it's in a form that is non-verbal. So who knows where it might come from?
Right.
But the process continues, I think.
Okay, because that's sort of interesting, because that comes along to I guess that's sort of a question of, because I've watched many things, and I've talked to a few people about this, that they've had they call them spirit guides that they have, that they converse with. There's been people that have talked that they say that they've been conversing with aliens from the Zeta Reticular star system and stuff like that, and others have said that they've talked to some type of angel or some type of some type of source. Other parts there that I guess Nikola Tesla was saying that he was getting through dreams. He was tapping into the Akashic records, or the one source that everybody gets all their information from, and that's where he came up with his sort of experiments. Would you say it was something sort of similar to that, or not?
Yeah, similar. I guess it was. I mean, spirit guides is probably the closest of all the things that you were talking about. They weren't aliens. I think they were. I mean, aliens meaning from another planet in the universe. So they weren't that. They were spiritual beings. They weren't in the physical universe, and they could manifest themselves through a medium, but they were spirits. So yeah, I think spirit guides would be the closest to that. Yes.
Hmm. Okay, and I guess I if so, what can you say that they were teaching you? I guess in a way that I guess that's what your last book was, but that this actually goes into this book, I guess, as well too, eh? So what would you say would be the lessons that they're sort of pushing you towards to go forward? That I guess that everybody should be, I guess, learning in a way, correct?
Well, that's it. Yeah, it is just the basic spiritual lessons. In my particular case, the main lessons were love and humility, both of which they told me I lacked. So they they regarded those as the fundamental spiritual qualities, which I think as anybody brought up in the Christian tradition would understand, that they are the fundamental spiritual qualities. And they're ones that we all like to think we have to a degree, but we don't have them anywhere near the fullest extent. So that's what they mostly told me about, was these two qualities, and how events that happened in my life would be pushing me towards understanding where I lacked these qualities. So it was very practical. It wasn't just saying, learn a bit of humility, be more loving, which it's not much use really, is it? Because we all know that. We all know we should be more loving. But they would point to situations where I'd failed in manifesting love that I should have done. And I even think they could manipulate circumstances, even in my outer life, whereby I would be tested, and I might pass the test, or more usually I would fail the test. But I guess you're only tested where you're weak, in spiritually speaking. So you are going to fail a lot of times before through the tests you develop the power to progress.
Right. Huh. See, that I remember because I went through the whole part of going to Sunday school and church, and that baptized in two or three different religions and stuff like that. And I remember the one part about the seven deadly sins and the seven virtues, and basically they're like the opposites of
Yeah.
you have the bad, and then the good is to go that way, right? Towards the seven virtues, right? To become basically a person that does no harm to anyone else, right? The golden rule, almost in a way, right? And you just, I'm just always sort of wondering what this part, like, what is, besides the part that we're here to learn, that which your book is, Earth is a school, and this is a part that we were sent here, or we were sent here to Earth to learn. So if we are looking at that part that we were nothing before we came here, but we do come back, is that like an ever ending cycle then that's going on? Like, so there's new spirits that were never ever here before, or are we all just sort of recycling through and keep on going forward?
I think it does end. I think there is a point, and that's where I would agree with the Eastern religions. There is a point where you no longer need to come back here. You've learnt all the lessons that the material world can offer, and I think that that's the end point, and then you would progress to higher levels of being. And I would think that there probably are new souls coming through quite a lot. There's a whole great gradation of spiritual being, of people, spiritual beings, people, same thing. in this world. And one of the things the masters, as I call them, or as they call themselves, one of the things they told to me is that people are by no means equal on the earth plane. Now, this goes against everything that we're told nowadays, isn't it? I mean, equality is the great big doctrine of our age, where everybody's equal. And of course, ultimately, everybody is equal in a kind of high spiritual sense. But in terms of how we've unfolded our potential, we're all on different rungs of the ladder.
Oh, for sure.
And so that, there is this great hierarchy of being with the kind of cherubim and seraphim at the top, and ants and bumblebees. No, I like bumblebees. Bumblebees are quite high. But things at the bottom. I don't know what mollusks. But the point is that equality only exists when everything is the same. And one of the great beauties of life is there is this huge variety of it. So this is what the master said, that men and women are by no means equal on the earth plane, but that's no reason for dismissing anybody. So that second point is very important. If you're going to say men are by no means equal, you have to also say that's no reason for dismissing anybody, because God is in everybody. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we also need to learn. I think our desire to talk of equality probably comes from a good place, but I think it's misunderstanding things. I think we mean well when we talk about equality, mm-hmm. but we're not actually looking at things as they are. And it would be better. It's never good, even with good intentions, to think something is true which isn't true, because it will come back and bite you in the end.
Right. Yeah. That whole part about the equality is, the equality, what I think about it is that it equals to the amount of input that you're putting into, right? You could say it moves to different things. It's like using percentage, like percentage changes for every part that it goes into. You can't just lock it down as to one term. So like if I'm putting in 100% and hoping to get 100% in return, is that'd be equality there. But if one person is putting in 1% and they're expecting 100% coming out, there is no equality in that equation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But the way that the thinking is nowadays, and this is I guess the turn of how things have come there, I guess, with the millennial age and the way they've done in school, is that everybody is equal no matter what you put in. Everybody gets the same at the end, no matter what. And that's sort of this weird thinking that a lot of, well, especially here in North America, that everybody thinks that they're entitled. I guess that's a word. There's an entitlement that's given to that everybody should be getting the same, right? But the input is not the same.
No, I agree with you. I think this is, people think this is a kind of spiritual feeling to have, but I think it's actually an anti-spiritual feeling, because if we remember again in the Bible, Jesus talks about people who they're given money. There's a parable where he talks about maybe a tenant of a landlord is given some money, and one fellow goes, just buries it in the ground. One fellow goes and spends it, and one fellow uses it to create something more. And it's the last person who is praised. They've all been given the exact same amount of money. That's equal on that level, but they've all done different things with it. And it's the one who created something more with it who is obviously the one who gets the praise. So that is something that the equality enthusiasts should understand, I think.
Yeah, or even you get into the whole part of the school, you can give a man a fish or teach a man to fish, who benefits at the end, right? So
true. Yeah, exactly.
So how about you? We have about 10 minutes left here, or something like that, or 5-10 minutes. So why? I know we sort of jumped around your book here. Can you sum up your book? I want people to come out and read this book too as well. But could you give sort of like a little sort of synopsis from beginning to end? Because I know I jumped around in parts of what you talked about. If you could sort of explain it a little bit better than I've done or jumped or tried to go do here.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's the book is about, we've touched on a lot of it, but the fundamental message of the book, and I think I'm not ashamed to say it has a message, is that we need to rediscover what we are. We've lost sight of what we are. We're not just people who come to this world for a brief period and die, and that's that. We have a purpose here, and we have an origin which goes back a long way into the past. We don't necessarily need to know how far back it goes, but the point is that we are pre-existing in the spiritual world, and then we come here to learn and to grow and to become more godlike ourselves, to grow closer to God and become more godlike. And that explains all the difficulties that we might encounter in this world, because in the spiritual world, there's no challenge or difficulty. It's a kind of sphere of oneness and peace and love. And you're not going to grow in that sphere because there's nothing to distress you. And you tend to grow when you're in difficulty. It's like, if you want to build up your muscles, you have to go to the gym and work out, and you have to pump those weights or whatever. But you're not going to develop your muscles if you're just sitting in the garden in a deck chair, sipping a drink.
Right.
And so this world is the same sort of idea from a spiritual perspective. It's like a spiritual gym. Yeah, that's what it is. And it causes us, it gives us hardship, it gives us problems, it questions us, it challenges us, it throws things at us. And then how we respond is going to make us grow or not. And sometimes we're driven to respond. Circumstances of life make us grow, and we can resist that if we really, really don't want to. We can, but I think most of us do accept the challenges to an extent, and that develops us. And if we come to the end of our life, we might feel we haven't really made much progress, but we don't really know, because that's all built into the higher level. And I think that afterwards there'll be a kind of like a school report,
right?
And we will find that we have grown, and we carry on into different levels of being. But I think we come back here. I think there are future challenges in this world because we haven't exhausted all the things it can offer until we get to the point where we have, and then once we have discovered God within ourselves completely, I think then we are ready to move on. But until we have, we probably do come back to this world or other similar, because I'm sure there are many worlds, similar ones elsewhere, to face fresh challenges. So the book it's like a sort of call to arms in a way that we've lost track of what we should be doing. Most people don't even have any kind of religion nowadays, do they? In the West, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to get our lives back on track, and as you were saying earlier, stop looking for technological fixes, because the technology can only affect us outwardly. Really, it's not going to develop our souls, and that's what we need to do.
Oh, that's great. Well, we're almost right at the end of our time here. I want to thank you very much, William. And do you have any place there that people can view your or get your book or view your pages or anything like that? When people want to contact you.
Well, the book it's on Amazon, and if you don't like Amazon, it should be you can order it through bookshops, because John Hunt, the publishers, they're available everywhere in Europe and North America, so they're all over the place. The book's called Earth is a School, and any bookshop should be able to order it for you. And I do have a website which is called Meeting the Masters. So if you put in Meeting the Masters, William Wildblood, then it should come up. It's a blog, really, where I have about 7 or 8 articles a month that I put up.
Okay.
And that keeps going. That keeps me busy.
Okay, well that's great there. I want to thank you very much for being on here. I see I got the red light there that I got to go. So thank you very much for coming on the delicious recipe.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Del. I've enjoyed our talk. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.